Hello, my name is Kristoffer Shields. I'm Assistant Research Professor at the Eagleton Institute of Politics and Historian at the Eagleton Center on the American Governor. This is John Weingart, the Associate Director of the Eagleton Institute of Politics and Director of the Center on the American Governor. And we are here today with a longtime former New Jersey Assemblyman, Senator, Legislator, and Governor, Don DiFrancesco. More specifically, Governor DiFrancesco spent over 25 years in the New Jersey State Legislature, mostly in the State Senate, including 10 years as the State Senate President, and then in 2001 became the 51st Governor of the state of New Jersey, finishing Christine Todd Whitman's term. Governor DiFrancesco, welcome. It's terrific to have you here today.
Pleasure to be with all of you.
We'll talk in a bit about your unusual role serving concurrently as State Senate President and also Governor. But I thought we'd start by getting to know you a little bit. You were born and raised in New Jersey, left to go to Penn State for college, which we will forgive for today.
Right.
But then came back to New Jersey to go to law school. So why don't you tell us a little bit about growing up in New Jersey, and then especially about that decision to go to law school, whether it was always your plan to be a lawyer or how that happened.
Well, I mean, I was born in Scotch Plains, actually, born in a house in Scotch Plains, youngest of 5, and my parents were immigrants from the same town in Italy, as were a lot of other locals in Scotch Plains from the same town. It just happened to be that's the way things worked out in those days. So I had lots of relatives in Scotch Plains, and I went to the local schools, went to Catholic school to 8th grade, and then Scotch Plains family public school, and applied to Penn State. A lot of my relatives were Rutgers people. Wanted to go out of state. I went to Penn State. Had a great time there. And while I was like a senior, my father encouraged me to think about law school, and I applied. I was lucky enough to get into Seton Hall at the time, and commuted, lived at home, commuted, got married during that time. Diane was Penn State graduate, but lived in Philadelphia. So we got married actually after my first year in law school, got an apartment, the usual thing, got an apartment, she had a job, had a child a couple years later and another one after that, but got out of law school, passed the bar, and started working for Judge Diana from Somerset County, who was not a judge at that time, became the assignment judge. And actually, Judge Diana, Wilford Diana, was a legislative aide to Ray Bateman at the time, and the chairman of the SCI. Ray had made him the chairman of the SCI, so I got a smattering of politics from that, and my uncle was the mayor of Scotch Plains. So I got to know political people because of the couple of relatives that were served locally, and so I county committee stuff. But I was just a local lawyer, municipal prosecutor, and Watergate came about in 73 and 74, and 73 in New Jersey, 74 in the rest of the country. And the legislature, assembly, I think they wound up with 9 people initially. I may be wrong, maybe 9 or 13 after Watergate, and the Senate had 9 too. And then they went to 13. So it was a dramatic change for the Republican Party nationwide, and particularly Brendan Byrne, of course, was successful, having beaten Charlie Sandman, who beat our incumbent Governor Cahill in the primary. So we were working for Governor Cahill, and all of a sudden Sandman beats him, the conservative, and gets killed by Brendan Byrne for a variety of reasons. And so a couple of years go by, and they're trying to win seats back, and never thought about this, but somebody, my local chair, approached me and said, look, you're very popular in Scotch Plains, you're a hometown boy, we have to win in this town. You should consider running for the assembly. Make a long story short, I got the nomination. I was lucky enough to beat Betty Wilson, who probably should have won the election, but it was in a territory that kind of went back to the Republican Party, and I was successful. And once you're in it, you can't get out. It seemed like it, and so I won re-election again, 77.
So it was 1975 that you first ran.
75, I was first elected, started serving January 76, income tax passed in 76.
Right.
So we were there all summer. And Brendan was the governor. And in 77, now Tom Kean was, by the way, Tom Kean was the minority leader in the assembly at the time. So that's how our relationship started. And so in 77, he ran in the primary for governor, but lost to Ray Bateman. And Ray then, of course, lost to Brendan, even though it was one-term burn, it was not one-term burn.
Right.
And he lost to Brendan. And so I served for a couple of years. And then Pete McDonough resigned from office in the middle of his term. I served the last 2 years of his term.
That's Pete McDonough Sr.
Pete McDonough Sr., yes. He was the state senator for a while, and he survived Watergate by a few votes. And so he decided to quit. In a convention, I was able to get the nomination, and I won the election that year and went to the Senate in 79 when there were 13 of us. And so Tom then ran for governor the next time, won, and we went from 13 to 18 with a new map that I was on the commission at that time. With a new map, we won a bunch of seats back, and it got to be where it probably should have been, 21 to 18. Gormley came over, made it 21-19. Carmen Recchio was the Senate president. John Russo was the Senate majority leader. And so I was the minority leader for 3 years, and I had little kids. It was a very difficult job for me. I mean, sounds great, but really don't have that much power. But I had a good relationship with the governor. So I got out after 3 years. I said, I can't do this anymore. I have to devote more time to my practice and more time to my kids. And so, the 80s went on in the minority. I thought about getting out at some point because I've been a minority for a long time. And Jim Courter loses to Jim Florio. And so that was kind of the down part for me. I mean, I've had it. I've been there a long time in the minority. And while I was still relatively young, I didn't view it that way. And so the next year, Christy Whitman almost beats Bill Bradley. Now, you're young, but Bill Bradley was kind of my age. But he was an icon to me. I mean, for us, Rhodes Scholar, Princeton, basketball, NBA. How could anybody come close to beating Bill Bradley? So we knew the following year we would win. We would win. And with the new map, we did win. We won 27 seats. We didn't expect to win 27 seats. So because of Governor Florio, who I have a great deal of respect for, and we are close friends, his desire with respect and his people around him, with all of the things they did in the first year, that caused Christy Whitman to always be able to beat Bill Bradley, and it caused us to win the legislature the following year in both houses. And because I had been the minority leader, I went after it, and I was lucky enough to be picked to be Senate president, and was there for 10 years. And the 10th year, of course, Governor Whitman seemed to want to leave, and President Bush, we talked about that. President Bush we didn't know if we thought he lost.
That's also President Bush Sr.
Yeah. Yeah, we went through both.
Yeah.
And then
Junior.
George W., we thought he lost, but then he won, and I guess Governor Whitman was close to the Bushes. I mean, through her father, she had tremendous contacts with the Bushes and the Eisenhowers. She wanted to leave and try to do something in Washington, and I guess trusted me enough to know that I wouldn't go crazy that 1 year. And so she left right after the Super Bowl. Giants were in the Super Bowl, like the next day. And I was sworn in and served until the second Tuesday in January of 2002.
So New Jersey had this unusual provision that as the Senate president, you would become acting governor if the governor was not.
Right.
Was that something you thought about in becoming Senate president? If someday I might be acting governor, or it wasn't on anyone's radar?
We never dreamed that would be possible.
It really hadn't happened before.
It hadn't happened since Woodrow Wilson.
Right.
And so no, we didn't think about it that way until that one final year when we knew Governor Whitman was really interested in moving on. Mm-hmm. I thought that what I didn't realize was there was case law in the Senate that you have to stay as president of the Senate. Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of weird. Yeah. And I think the press corps thought it was really weird that now I would still be president of the Senate and governor at the same time. They didn't like that. Mm-hmm. And I can understand that. You're controlling 2/3 of the process. But on the other hand, that's what they said I had to do. So I think after a month or so, people got used to it. So, that issue kind of went by the wayside. But I remember before Governor Whitman actually resigned, President Bush was sworn in 2001. And when we went to Washington, and she went as a cabinet officer, I went as the governor, even though it was like a few days off. Governor Engler from Michigan came up to me and he said, I was reading this article in the New York Times, which I realized then everybody reads the Sunday Times all over the country at that time. He said, "You're president of the Senate and you're governor." He said, "Unbelievable." He said, "I wish I could control the Senate." And that told me that people are following this stuff, and of course, that theoretically makes you the most powerful state politician in the country by virtue of the fact that you have both. Sure. Right. So it was, you get used to it. I mean, for a couple of weeks, it was like, a real high. I went, oh my God, this is unbelievable. But, you get used to it. I guess you get used to the state troopers, At the beginning, it's like, oh my God, they're coming to my house every day. They're hanging around here. Well, you get used to that too. And it worked out. It worked out well. I thought it worked out very well, and legislatively, as well as governmentally. I think that the 1 year went by very quickly, but it seemed like more than a year once we had the 9/11 issue. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning, the first January, February, March to April, I was in a running mode. Mm-hmm. I was to run for governor, so that there was a lot of focus on that, and the press corps really felt that I had a huge advantage that I shouldn't have. But so we were focused on that, and then when I chose not to run, then I tried to focus strictly on the legislative part of it.
And before it was clear that Governor Whitman was going to Washington, were you thinking about running or planning to run for governor?
We were thinking about it. Yeah, I think, and so were other right. people. I think Bob Franks being one of them. Mm-hmm. Jack Collins, Brett Schindler, of course. Mm-hmm. There were a host of people who were thinking about running. So I had been working on it for a couple of years, traveling all over the state, going to every party, talking to Republicans all over the state for a couple of years. Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned that you had a sense that Governor Whitman was considering leaving before she did. At what point did it become fairly clear to you that you were going to be taking over for her as governor? Was it when President Bush won, or was it before that?
When he won, because we really thought he was going to win. But prior to that, she did run for a short period. She did try to run for a short period for U.S. Senate, right. And then she dropped out of that. So when she did that, we knew that she really wanted to try to move on to do something else. I don't know why she didn't stay in that race. I thought she could have won that race, but she chose not to. And then went to Washington in February of 2001.
So what was the trend? You had your own staff as Senate President, right?
Oh, yeah.
And did they stay your close staff, or did you meld the two staffs together, or how that work?
I let John Bennett and the staff run the Senate, really. I didn't really. Greg Edwards was my executive director, and he would come to see me with respect to the operations of it. But I didn't really want to be too hands-on there, and I didn't want to be at the podium very often either, because I thought that was too it looked bad. I thought it looked bad. So once in a while I'd be on the podium to open up the session, and I would leave, because I just didn't think it would look good for me to be at the podium time and time again, because as you said, this hadn't happened since Woodrow Wilson. Now, it happened to Cody 3 years later, but I didn't have that advantage. So I didn't want to make it. I didn't want to be hanging in the Senate, looking like I'm running the show here and I'm pounding on people and trying to influence them too often. So I stayed away from it actually. Yeah.
And how did you balance those two roles? I mean, as Senate President, you're posting legislation that you may have various reasons to post that you might not even support as governor, right? How did you balance that as you were wearing both hats?
I learned I learned quickly that you had to start saying no. to legislators, and because there were not only legislation, but there were judgeships, jobs, and everybody had their own thing. So I had Jeff Michaels, my chief of staff, former graduate of Eagleton, and he was the no guy, But he closely monitored the Senate list to make sure that we weren't posting bills that would detrimentally affect the executive department. So it was a tough balance, but it worked out pretty well, actually. I mean, it worked out very well. I mean, it was only one major piece of legislation that we couldn't get passed, and I was very close friends with Jim McGreevey for 20 years, but I have to blame him for this, and Brett Schellner. And that was the Nets Devils group. They called them Yankee Nets. And they came to me, rich people, who were interested in Newark. And really, their main interest was the city of Newark, particularly Ray Chambers, who grew up in Newark, and he didn't care about sports, he cared about Newark. And they had this plan for building this arena for these two teams and moving them out of the other arena so that it would help Newark. And I bought into the plan, and of course, because I was president of the Senate, I could get it passed. The legislation passed in the Senate. But then when it went to the Assembly, they wanted to hold it till after the election because it affected Bergen County. The other place was in Bergen County, so there were some negative effects in Bergen County, they felt. So once McGreevey won the election, I knew it was going to be a problem because he told me he wanted to do this himself. And my answer to him was, Jim, you're going to be there when this happens. I'm leaving. So he didn't buy that. And so the Democrats wouldn't support the legislation in the Assembly. Once I left, the Republicans weren't supporting it in the Senate. So he could never get it passed. They did build an arena in a different way for one team because then the Yankee Nets got frustrated. They sold it. They sold the Nets. They went to Brooklyn, and the Devils are still in Newark. So they did get an arena eventually in a different way than we had. But that's probably the only thing I can think of that really failed. Mm-hmm. And I felt bad about that because I really thought, again, Newark is a city that we have to build up, because it affects New Jersey dramatically. So, otherwise, legislatively, from April to June 30th, we were very successful and tried to keep everybody happy. Budget was okay, and it worked out well. But then the summer came, and it was kind of, slow. I know Chris Christie writes in his book that he came to see me in Wildwood. I was signing a bill in Wildwood to convince me to sign off on his U.S. attorney position. He exaggerates it in the book, but it is accurate. But he exaggerates that, put the phone, I got to call George Bush, and blah, 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 but it did work out for him. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, September 11th came, and that changed everything.
Right.
But we'll get to that. Before that, when you realized that you were going to be governor, mm-hmm. Did you turn to any former governors for advice, or what did you learn from the experience of other governors?
Well, Governor Whitman left, but I had her cabinet. Right. I think it was only perhaps one or two people at the most that left immediately. I think the treasurer was one, but other than that, everybody stayed. So I didn't want to upset the apple cart that way. John Farmer was the Attorney General. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to keep everything in place because I thought that was the right thing to do. Beyond that, I think, of course, Tom Kean, even as President of the Senate, we would meet with Kean once a year. So Tom, we were very close, and so I talked to him. Governor Florio, pretty friendly with him because I'd served 2 years as Senate President with him. Right. And we got to be pretty close. And Brendan would come by a lot and talk to Brendan Byrne a lot too. So I was welcomed any advice they gave me, because I was like brand new and it was a new thing. Now, you're not just a state senator and you're blaming everybody else. Now you're on the spot every day, and because governor's a totally different situation. when John Corson told me he was going to run for the U.S. Senate, I said, "You're in the U.S. Senate. I have no idea what you do every day. I'm an involved politician. I don't know what you vote, how you vote, but you run for governor, and every day the press is going to want to know what are you doing today, and where do you stand on this, where do you stand on that." So that was the big change. Dealing with the press, I think, was the hardest part for me, the biggest change, because you can't hide. You can't go back to your Scotch Plains district and control it. You're there. So that was a huge adjustment. Every day dealing with the press wherever you went. And you get used to it, but it's an adjustment. And so I sought out a lot of people in terms of advice and things like that. Lots of different kinds of people, former cabinet officers included.
Do you think legislative experience is an advantage for a governor,
Huge.
or does it take a different personality?
I think it's a huge advantage. Tom Kean was a long-time legislator. I think it helped him a lot in knowing how to deal with a Democratic legislature. Governor Whitman didn't have that experience, but she had a Republican legislature. Chris Christie did not have a Republican legislature, but he was able to develop a relationship with the Senate President, which is what I tell every governor: make sure you love your Senate President. That worked well for him. I mean, he accomplished a lot with a Democratic majority. Brendan Byrne had a big adjustment the first couple of years, a huge adjustment for him, coming from the bench to having overwhelming majorities. It actually worked against him, having those overwhelming majorities. And it was, I think by the time I got there, he was better off because they had, the less of a majority and therefore less things you have to do that you don't want to do. So I think it is definitely an advantage to have some legislative experience right off the bat. And the one thing I watched it with Governor Kean, when he first won, if you remember, he did not put campaign people in the front office right away. He changed. He knew that keep the campaign people over here, but now you have to run the government. So I'm going to bring in people that are going to help me run the government. And that's what he did. And I watched that very closely. I was a minority leader. So Carrie Edwards was the chief of staff for a while, then the attorney general. Lou was chief of staff for a while, right?
Yeah.
And so I watched that, and it was part of that. And you learn a lot in watching Governor Kean, I thought. Governor Florio, who I talked to a lot, he was someone that did his homework all the time. I mean, we could not go to him and bluff him in any way on legislation or anything like that. We knew that. We learned that quickly. And we had a good relationship with him those 2 years the last 2 years of his term I was president of the Senate and Chuck Italian was Assembly Speaker, and we had a really good time. I always say to him, you're Italian. Could you smiled a little bit more? 20,000 votes. I mean, come on. But he almost won re-election. Florio Free in 93, was he?
93, yeah.
He almost won re-election. 20,000 votes. That's nothing really. And I used to say to him recently, not then, if you left the gun guys alone until the second term, your second term, you'd have won re-election. He hates it when I say that. Just want you to know that, because he believes strongly in that legislation. And I got a lot of mail tying me with Governor Florio. Because when we took the majority, we had veto-proof majorities in the first 2 years. Chuck Italian put the bill up to repeal the assault weapon ban. Comes to my house, my caucus wanted to pass it, we pass it. A couple months go by, I'm somewhere in Florida at a conference. He puts the override the veto up, because Florio vetoed the bill, right? So he puts the override up, passes, leans on these people to pass it. Comes to me. I said, oh my God. So I sit on it. And of course people are begging me to sit on it too. And as the longer it went, the harder it was for anybody to get votes for it. And so they hated me. They hated me at that time. I got terrible mail. And so eventually it just went away. But so I got tied to him for those couple of years. The mail was ugly, unbelievable, terrible mail. I guess now it's just emails and stuff, and now it's social media. But then you were getting mail, crazy mail. But so Governor Florio was a big policy guy, but I thought had he just planned, a little bit, like don't do everything. Don't do everything. And people advise you to do everything in the first year. People do advise you to do everything in the first year. But he lost because of it, which benefited Governor Whitman, and she beat him by 25,000 votes. And then,
So you must have gotten a lot of pressure about appointments to get rid of some cabinet officers and bring in more.
Not really. No. We made a decision not to make big changes. Yeah, and as the year went on, cabinet officers would resign to take jobs and stuff. So that the assistant treasurer, the assistant DEP commissioner would all become the acting cabinet officers. We had a lot. By the end of the year, it was mostly that. It's fortunately we had that anthrax issue, which we'll come to later. But I had the commissioner of health had resigned, and we had an epidemiologist who was the assistant. So he knew. I've learned now that no one ever knows everything about anthrax. What was the other one from Africa? Recently. Ebola. Yeah. Everybody thinks they know that they know everything about, but they learn there are things you don't know about these things. So even then the epidemiologists weren't really up to speed on really what anthrax could do or not do. So
let's move to 9/11. So
sure.
What was the day like? How did you
know what? It was interesting to me. A couple of things. Right before that, and I had done this a couple of years for Governor Whitman too, but the National Guard, you weren't in the National Guard, were you?
No, I was not.
So neither was I. But the National Guard, they train, and every year they have like a review down in Seagirt. And so you're there as the governor to watch them march and blah, blah, blah. And I said to my wife, I remember it well, it was like on the weekend. I said, what do these people do? Like there's thousands of them, like these are people with jobs and stuff. But we're here, it's nice and everything. And then Saturday of that, right before Tuesday, this fellow who went to the University of Miami from Essex County, he was a friend of mine, he calls me up, I'm down the shore. And because we had a little house down the shore, all those years. He calls me and said, do you want to go to the Penn State Miami game? I said, not really. It's the first game of the year. He said, well, we have a plane, a private plane. I said, oh wait, we're gonna fly up, see the game, and fly back? He said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. So we go to the game. Penn State gets killed by Miami, and we go fly back. And now it's Sunday, and I'm doing stuff, and Tuesday comes along, and I had them appoint Hella Young, whose father was a survivor, and she at the time Hella was the lottery person and a former Miss New Jersey. She wanted to be she was on the Holocaust Commission. I made her the chair of the Holocaust Commission. So Tuesday we're at Drumthwacket hosting the Holocaust Commission. And so I'm speaking to the Holocaust Commission members at Drumthwacket. And Trooper walks over to me and whispers in my ear, a plane just crashed into the World Trade Center. That's all she said. She didn't know anything more than that. Okay, jeez. And then, whatever it was, 20 minutes later, they said, another plane just crashed, we better get out of here. And so, announced to everybody, and I left, and we went to the emergency management headquarters, and everybody was there, John Farmer, National Guard, everybody was there, and our lines of communication, really were in New York. at the Trade Center. So we really didn't have any communication on it. So I asked, Buster was there, and he wanted to go to New York. So we had a state trooper helicopter go to New York to find out what was going on, like what was the situation. And we sent a lot of people to Liberty State Park to wait. In fact, there was a convention of surgeons nearby, and they all went to Liberty State Park to see if people needed help. When I finally got there, not that long later in the afternoon to Liberty State Park, there were vehicles from Delaware, Pennsylvania, emergency vehicles, people who wanted to help, and from all over our state, there waiting. But the irony is not very many people came to Liberty State Park. You either died or you went home as fast as you could. So I went on Brian Williams' show later on that night, and I flew back by helicopter to Trenton, and that started so the next day I went to New York with Rudy Giuliani and George Pataki, Governor Pataki, and we sat through Giuliani's meeting and then his press conference. And they had, New York is New York. I mean, he was phenomenal. Their people are phenomenal in terms of crisis, with the crisis, and they had it. What their recovery was going to be under pretty good control at that time. And then he had a press conference, and as you all both know, that he became a rock star because of 9/11. And that's how I got to know him. And I was there a lot for the next few years.
Did you have a relationship with Pataki or
Yes.
Giuliani before?
Not Pataki, not so much. No, not at all. Not really, not a real relationship. No. Afterwards, yes. In fact, once a year we still see Pataki for dinner. But they felt the impact. When we put a family assistance center in Liberty State Park to help the New Jersey people, and hoping they would come to us, the families would come to us. So for those next few weeks, I was there all the time in New York and back and forth, and it took most government, and government was very much involved in the recovery. For a few days, we were worried about other things happening. But nothing else did happen. But we were worried about it. I sent National Guard to the nuclear power plant along the coast. When the Jets played the first game, I had a tremendous amount of firepower surrounding it. So it's just so people feel safe. I wanted people to feel safe. You knew you couldn't do much about it. You'd really not be able to do much, but you wanted people to feel safe in New Jersey. And so, we would deploy all these National Guard people everywhere, to my point from before. Yeah. And the search and rescue team was made up of people who were working regular jobs, and they were the first ones on the scene the day after to try to find people who were still alive, and there really weren't anybody, but they were there. Our search and rescue team was there first. I called them, and they're made up of a whole variety of people for obvious reasons. You want engineers, you want state police, you want this, you want that. I called them and I said, I'm coming to say hello to you. And the guy says to me, you got to bring a flag. Bring a flag. Okay. So I find them and I hand this fellow the American flag and the New Jersey flag, and the guy's crying and he's tears in his eyes. And they move on and they try to help out. And they're one of like 30 or 40 search and rescue teams from all over the country that actually came. Because when President Bush came the following week, he and I went to the Javits Center, and I had him shake hands with every single member of not only our search and rescue team, but everybody. There were like 30 of them, Puerto Rico, all over the country. So it was amazing times. It was surreal, really, in a way. And it was all about recovery after that, all about recovery. New York was very concerned that we would aggressively try to bring their business to New Jersey. And of course, Pataki called me a lot about that, and I assured him that we were not going to do anything like that. Wall Street was closed down. They opened up pretty quickly. They were able to open up pretty quickly a few days later. It was amazing times. I mean, listen, COVID was a totally much harsher thing because of the length of time it's taken. Right. But at that time, this was like it was an attack, and a lot of innocent people, a lot of children growing up without a member of the family, and so it was. I was just lucky to be there, and I was honored to be there.
Were you coordinating in those days with Governor Pataki, with Rudy Giuliani?
Governor Pataki, Giuliani, the FBI. Governor Whitman was EPA administrator.
Oh, right, of course.
And so the administration, because we were looking for a lot of help from the administration. President Bush, I went down to see the speaker. Was it Hasker? Yeah. The speaker. A lot of senators came up to Liberty State Park to watch. A bunch of them. Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, of course, Hillary Clinton, of course, being from New York. We hosted a lot of them at Liberty State Park. We had a hearing where we made a pitch for New Jersey.
Did you have to? There are all the emergency procedures that staff people go through to anticipate a disaster that might come. I imagine with something totally unforeseen, those don't end up speaking to the moment very well.
Exactly. In fact, 9/11, changed a lot of things that we do, a lot of what we live, particularly traveling. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that was glaring is there was no coordination,
right.
And no one ever thought about homeland security.
Right.
It's uncalled for before that in the state level, but now local, county, state presumably coordinate together on security and coordination of emergency management. Yeah, it wasn't the case before.
So in your situation, you must. Who did you rely on to say you should go to Washington as opposed to New York on a particular day, or go visit with this family, or how?
Well, I did hire Lillian Barone who worked at the Port Authority to handle the recovery. Mm-hmm. She was terrific. Cyril Scalera was a policy plan. Cyril did a lot for me with respect to the recovery, and his people arranged for us to do a lot of those things. Yeah.
Good.
You gave a speech to the New Jersey legislature on
right.
October 3rd,
right.
2001. What?
Yeah, he sent it to me about a year ago.
Yeah, we have it on the website.
Yeah.
The video of it, and it's a fascinating speech. It's a terrific speech. What do you remember from that day, and what were you trying to accomplish with that address?
Well, remember there's a North and South Jersey in the state. I learned that politically. I never thought of it that way, but this was focused in New York. So I wanted everybody in the state to be aware of what really went on and how difficult this was for people up in the metropolitan area, and how damaging it had been. So I arranged for the legislators to be there at the site one day, and then we decided to make this speech, not only thank some people, but to outline some proposals that we needed to pass in order to get on track, to plan for the future, and for all of New Jersey. Because a lot of Southern legislators, in fact, Jack Collins was a speaker, and he's from Salem County. So that was the goal of that speech, was to just put people at ease, but also let them understand we're in charge. It's working. We're going to work this out. We're going to move forward. We're going to plan to do things differently in the future, and we have to have a plan for that. We didn't call it Homeland Security at the time. We put together a commission. We beefed it up to deal with the future. And I let Jim McGreevey decide who would chair that. I mean, the former FBI director offered to do it, Rudy. Well, he was a former FBI director under President Clinton. Offered, he was from Hudson County originally, offered to be, but I think Jim decided on somebody else. But
at this point, this was sort of
we knew we had to beef up that, because that had to be an agency that coordinated local and county and state.
Right. And it was sort of the election was still to be held, but the assumption was McGreevy had a strong chance of being the next governor. Right?
Well, this was after the election that we
Okay.
actually started dealing with this. John Farmer and I talked about it, and it was his idea. He came up with the FBI director's name.
You mentioned earlier that that everything changed on 9/11, which I think is broadly true, right?
Sure.
In a number of ways. How did it change specifically being governor? What was it like being governor before 9/11 versus being governor after 9/11?
Well, it changed perceptually. It changed my whole role. So as governor, I mean, people now looked at me differently. I found anyway, and perhaps because of the publicity, perhaps because I'm in charge, so to speak, and so it was a whole huge change. I went from being like a lame duck kind of guy to somebody who has a responsibility to do something on behalf of the state of New Jersey. So I saw that change pretty quickly. Yeah, other governors were calling me, legislators were calling me, and I think they just viewed me differently after that. It seems that way. Yeah. And while I thought I had done a lot as governor legislatively, a lot of kid stuff, a lot of health stuff that we wanted to get done, everything focused now on me being in charge at 9/11. And that was the way, kind of a legacy thing, even though I rather see my whole legislative career as a legacy. But that was kind of, and Jim McGreevy always introduces me that way, as the 9/11 person. So that changed. That was the big change, is perceptually. Now I'm really governor in New Jersey and really have a major responsibility, not just sitting back waiting for the next person to come by.
Now, obviously, at that point, you had long ago made the decision not to run for governor.
Right, like in April.
Had you also made the decision by then, because that was basically when you left politics, right? Was after that.
Yes.
Had you more or less made the decision at that point that you were finished with politics and heading back to law, or was this something that helped drive that decision? Did you have any regrets about that decision? Where were you in terms of politics and legacy?
Interesting that you say that. We were so focused on running, and then we decided not to run, and for the first time in 26 years, the primary comes and I'm not on the ballot. Like it's a weird feeling. It was like, but I had made a decision. This was it. It's either up or out. And I'd been there a long time. I thought at 57 I was pretty old, and because I'd been there 26 years, and I thought, I shouldn't stay. At the time, I thought I shouldn't just stay and sit in the room now, back in the Senate, having done all of this. And after I left, you kind of wish you were still there, because you're so part of the action for so many years. The budget, the legislative, posting bills, that it's a huge adjustment. So, for a while I thought, well, maybe I could have run for Senate and stayed a couple more years. But I think I made the right decision. I know Dick Cody didn't. He changed. He chose to do it differently than I. He wanted to stay in the legislature. But I thought, I'd been there so long. I'd been minority leader, been Senate president, been governor for a year. It's time for me to move on and do something else. I have a family, like kids, and it's worked out well for me. And I guess it's worked out well for him. But for my case, I thought it was the right thing to do. Yeah.
Was there any point in your career you thought about running for Congress, having a Washington focus?
Oh yeah. I mean, I guess I should tell these stories, right? I mean,
of course. Yeah. It's just us. Yeah.
So I was in the minority, though, right? And Matt Rinaldo was my congressman and my friend. And for a short while, Chuck, whenever we thought he was going to get out, Chuck Hardwick really wanted to run for Congress. But Matt stayed, and Chuck left and went back to Pfizer. And so finally, I'm in the majority. And I'm actually not only in the majority, but I'm president of the Senate in 1992. And in August, he calls me, Matt Rinaldo. And he said, I have to have a cup of coffee. Okay, go have a cup of coffee. And he says to me, he had been there maybe 15 years in Congress, And he said, I'm not going to run for re-election, which was November, 92. And he says, you're my friend. I want you to run for my spot. He said, you'll never be in a majority. They have been in a minority for 40 years, the Republicans. You'll never be in a majority, but it's a great job. You travel all over the world. You're doing this. He gave me all the perks, You're not going to get any bills passed, that kind of stuff. And I knew right that moment, I'm not going to do this. I said, Matt, let me think about it. And I called him up a week later and said, look, I like what I'm doing. I actually can get things done. My wife would go crazy if I decide to run for Congress and go to Washington. I have 3 daughters. Bob Franks is single. He wants to run. Let's let him run. He wouldn't talk to me for months, this guy, Matt, because he thought I should be the guy. And Bob did, so I really had a big chance then. I mean, I would have left, and I guess Don Dorsey was the majority there at the time, But I liked what I was doing. It was a great position. It was a great position. And Bob ran for Congress and then lost to Corzine 8 years later. I could have done then. I had thought I would always do it while I was in the minority, but then my life had changed so much with being president of the Senate. I just thought it was a better position for me and my family.
So the November 2001 election comes, and McGreevey is the governor-elect.
Jimmy wins, which wasn't a surprise.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was the next few months like there with the transition?
Well, we tried to do as much as we could for him because, as I said, we had been friends for 20 years, Jim and I. And I knew him when he was first a staffer in the assembly. So we tried to help him as much as we can. I left him a lot of appointments, the only thing I didn't like was that what I mentioned before about the Newark thing. But otherwise, I was all in for him, and hope that he would do a great job.
Was there a sense then? It's easy to forget now because that was November,
Right.
and 9/11 happened in September.
Right.
That it seems like a different time, right? But at the time, there was still a 9/11 cloud, right, hanging over in November, and there was still fear. Did that have any impact on the transition? Was
Yes.
there any?
We continued to work. Well, we had that anthrax issue too. We continued to work hard on these issues, and Jim did his thing. We didn't involve him too much. We gave him briefings, but we just continued to work hard until the second Tuesday in January. It was chaos because not only was the governorship going Democrat, but so was the legislature, except the Senate was 2020. So everybody wanted their bill passed. So it was chaos that way. Everybody wanted their bill passed before the end, like usual. And so now I'm only not only doing the executive stuff. Now I gotta deal with these legislators, and everybody wanted their judgeships, et cetera. So we were really busy those last couple of months, and it was chaos. And I was busy really every day with this stuff. It was till the second Tuesday.
Had you played much of a role in the campaign, or did you sort of
No, I
step
didn't
out
play.
of that?
Which campaign?
The gubernatorial campaign after you left. After
Rich
you left the
Shuttle
campaign,
The Shondaland campaign.
No, not at all.
Yeah, right.
Not at all. No, I wanted McGreevey to win. I thought he would be the better choice. At least at the time, I thought he'd be the better choice. And Brett, had criticized me a lot, but I thought McGreevey would be a better choice, and he had a lot of great background, and I thought he'd be kind of a moderate Democrat. And, I didn't involve myself at all. I try to help legislators. I'd go to their functions, a lot of that. Everybody wanted you to be at their function, and I tried to do as much as I could. And it wound up 2020. I guess, as I joked with former staffer, I said, I guess if I decided to stay in the Senate, it would have been 2119 for a couple of years anyway, for 2 years.
Right.
And because then they lost more seats after the 2 year, the new map, and after 2 years. But it was very busy those November, December into January. And then, as I always said, second Tuesday in January, 12 o'clock, I'm out. So it's a totally different situation. So We go home, and Tom Kane calls me that night. I said, Tom, what's up? He said, just want to see how you're doing. Because, I had the same feeling, I had the same situation. You're home, nobody's calling you. So, yeah, it's a huge adjustment. But in my case, that second Tuesday, 12 o'clock, Bennett and Cody were acting governors.
Because you were no longer president of the Senate.
Right. So my term had ended. My Senate term ended.
Right.
So that 1 week, because it's a week before McGreevey was sworn in, they were co-acting governors, I guess I should say. Yes.
And that's how we got to have 5 governors in 8 days.
Right. Right.
Which will never happen again.
No. I guess they decided down the road after Dick Cody was governor. I guess that's when they changed the law. Right after he was
changed the Constitution.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said before. This might be a whole separate conversation, but you said you're proud of lots of things you accomplished as governor, yes. And what people talk about is what we've done is 9/11. What are some of the areas where?
Well, I mean, we did a lot in the health in the kids area. Cyril Sclera was an expert on that, and that's why I brought him for that 1 year, because I wanted to do a lot of good stuff in the area of kids, and he had been the executive director of the Association for Children. So we passed quite a few bills that way. Newborn screening, for example, we expanded that. We had a bill signing at Robert Wood Johnson. We expanded newborn screening dramatically, and it was a big deal. We had insurance for kids. A lot of stuff dealing with kids who grew up in unfortunate circumstances. As an aside, and it's not necessarily a big health thing, but Governor Whitman had vetoed the bill to mandate insurance for in vitro fertilization when she was there. I'm assuming insurance, big insurance companies, they lobby you, blah, 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 hire lobbyists. We had passed it. She leaves. I wanted, I'm getting these emotional letters from people about that issue. And so we passed it again. Now, of course, I'm president of the Senate and governor, so we passed it easily, right? And I signed it. And although the insurance companies didn't like it, I thought it was a good thing to do. So after I'm out of office, I would meet people. We'd be shocked to meet people in a mall or something, guys pushing twins or something. People, I said a few different times over the next couple of years, people come up to me and say, "It wasn't for you, I wouldn't have these kids." So we tried to do as much in that area as we could, because on the other areas of tax and all of that, we had already had 10 years of that kind of stuff. So we wanted to do something to help people in unfortunate circumstances, and we did a lot. Cyril has a big list of things we did. Yeah. So that was that. I mean, and the judge thing becomes very difficult, and I know it's difficult now.
Yeah.
While reading newspapers, but because in these bigger counties, these legislators get so involved in these judges, so that you have to put these packages together, Bergen, Essex, Hudson, so to keep everybody happy. And Jim Harkness, who was chief counsel, and he was terrific because he had a legislative background too, because he worked for me for 10 years, but he was terrific. He has spent a lot of time on dealing with legislators and appointments of judges, because again, it's the end of the year and everybody wanted their judges, and so I worked closely with the Bar Association with respect to that. So that takes a lot of time too. But going back to the 9/11 thing, Pataki and I, in the summertime, had signed the leases to Silverstein and Westfield Corporation. That's when they theoretically sold the World Trade Center to these people, but on the 99. We signed them in New York, outside, hot day, blah, blah, blah. And I said to Silverstein, to me, I'm a little guy from Scotch Plains. I said, "You own the World Trade Center. This is unbelievable." And of course, a month later, it was down. And it was just surreal, you know? It was just amazing.
So what have you been doing since 2002 when you left? And went home?
Well, I went back to a law firm, and I was on a couple of boards. I've been chairman of the Park Commission in Somerset County for 4 years. I did that. I was on the hospital board for 4 years at University Hospital. When they split up, when Chris Christie divided it up, he called me and I said, "Yeah, I would do it." And that took a lot of my time. Those 4 years, I put a lot of time and my own money into being the chairman because in the beginning I was doing everything committee-wise and all that. I was on every committee, everything, and so I was there every day for the 4 years at University Hospital. So it was a great experience for me. I mean, I learned a lot about hospitals and not-for-profits and indigents in Newark. I mean, and interacted with all the Newark people lots of times, particularly the county executive and the legislators. So that was a great experience for me. The 4 years there and the 4 years on the Park Commission. Of course, being on these corporate boards, it's not so exciting, but it's just things I was doing. But I have 7 grandchildren I didn't have back then, so I spend a lot of time with family.
Have you ever been tempted or come close to getting back into politics?
No, I don't even know. No, not really. Although, a couple of people called me when Governor McGreevey announced he was going to resign, which shocked me. In fact, I wish I could have called him just to finish out your term, I wanted him to finish his term. He was a friend of mine. And, people called him, because if he resigned right away, you would have an election right away. I think it was in the summer when he announced it. August. And of course, if he really resigned then, I think he would have an election in November.
That's right.
Right.
But he didn't resign then. I think Ray was telling me he and others talked him into staying until after that, and therefore that benefited Senator Cody. Right. And so he stayed, and then so that was the only time you're like, shouldn't I think about this? But other than that, no, not really. No.
You mentioned judges, and so senatorial courtesy was something
Right.
you have a unique set of vantage points on that of trying to get judges nominated, and
Right.
both exercising it yourself to block something or get attention, and being thwarted, I assume.
Right. Senatorial courtesy really benefits the minority mostly. I had 2 experiences with it in the Senate. When I first was minority leader, and I was a kid, really, didn't realize at the time, but I was like, oh my God, I'm 35 years old, and these older guys. Jerry Cardinale chose to hold up Sylvia Prester, who wrote the rules. I'm a lawyer, right? She writes the rules. I said, Jerry, so he exercised, but the majority overrode, after a few weeks, overrode his senatorial courtesy. You can do that. You can vote to override it. So that was my first experience with that issue. And then years went by, and then I'm president of the Senate. And John Dorsey decides to hold up Marianne Espinosa, Michael Murphy's wife. Right. And so I call him into my office. Remember now, he didn't like me at this point because I had become Senate president and not him. So he never talked to me. I called him in the office and said, John, there's bigger fish to fry in this election. I think this is a bad thing. It's a bad precedent. I've been through this before. I don't think you should do this. We're in the majority. It's not our job to hold up people who are on the bench for tenure because of personal reasons. And he dismissed the whole argument. So I went to the caucus. We had 27, right? So I'm one of 27. And I asked them to override his courtesy, and they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. So I went to the judge, and I talked to her. I said, "Let me put you through without tenure, and people won't know. People don't know, and get tenure 7 years later." She wouldn't do it. So I was frustrated, and Gordon McGinnis decides to run against John and beats him in a Republican district. So it benefits me because John's the majority leader and he doesn't talk to me, right? So John Bennett becomes the majority leader now. So the day we were sworn in, I announced that we would no longer have senatorial courtesy for people who are in office, whether it be a judge, particularly judges naturally, or someone else in a high position of power who needed to have a second term of senatorial courtesy, of Senate affirmation. And that was a shock to people, but it was fine. No one ever questioned me about it after that day. So for the next 8 years, I wouldn't allow that ever. And it worked out. And I think they still do that. I think that to this day. So I fixed it in an unusual way, but I couldn't fix it when John was there. And he lost an election over it.
Right.
Gordon came. Gordon was there for 4 years. You probably didn't know Gordon McGinnis.
No.
But he was really terrific legislator, charming guy, right?
Yep.
4 years he's in the Senate in Morris County. You think he would win re-election? No. Next election, the Republican wins. Tony Bucco.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm not saying Morris County's like that today,
Right.
but back then I said to Tony, Tony, are you kidding? The guy's been here 4 years. Gordon is, I knew Gordon before that. This is Gordon McGinnis. He said, I'm going to run. He won easy. Now, that wouldn't happen today because I know, you see the election results today have changed in Morris County. Where I live in Somerset County, it's totally different. Everything is very competitive everywhere.
But you still have senatorial courtesy for the rest of the people, the Supreme Court
if you're
nominees
not in
today.
office, for a judge,
Right.
they still have it. They love that. That's when you get to be governor, you hate it.
Right. Where you sit.
But I controlled the Senate, so it was a little different for me. But Christie Whitman, Governor Kane, Governor Flora, they hated it. They hated it. Naturally, I would hate it too.
Yeah.
Along those kinds of lines, there are a number of kind of enduring New Jersey policy issues, right, that you had to deal with, certainly in your legislative career, but then also specifically in your year as governor. I'm thinking about things like school funding, property taxes, pensions. What is your take, and certainly we're still talking about those same issues today, right, affordable housing. What is your take on those issues at the time, and then also how New Jersey has handled it in the years since you've been governor, the state of the state today?
Well, we'll start with the affordable housing issue. I thought we were handling it pretty well at the time, and previous to that, I thought it was working well. I think the Council on Affordable Housing was a terrific way to deal with it, rather than take it out of the courts, because every judge has a different feeling about this, but bring it to one particular group, and that was good. And I've always felt the regional contribution arrangement was good because it helped the urban areas. The one thing you have to do in New Jersey, you have to continue to help the urban areas. And so I think that issue was fine for the period of time that I was president of the Senate and governor. And with regard to like school funding, Governor Whitman had tried a few things, and we did expand to pre-K. We did do that. We just continued the same. We didn't try to make any changes on school funding. We didn't have the time to do something. I never thought that we should be spending to the level of the richest districts in the Abbott districts. I'd always thought that we should be spending to the average districts. I didn't think that Newark should get what the richest districts spend, but rather the average. But that's been the law, and that's not changed at all. So school funding, I added 2 Abbott districts actually. I added Plainfield, and I added Neptune. I wanted to add Plainfield because I thought I wanted to help Plainfield. I knew, I kind of grew up nearby. And the frustrating part to me is today, 20 years later, Plainfield has 5 or 6 charter schools. And I'm not sure another town in the whole county has 1 charter school, even Elizabeth. And so I'm frustrated. I put them in an Abbott district because I wanted them to have millions more. They got millions more. it's just not working. And so that's a frustrating thing, the whole Abbott thing. And some of the towns have changed dramatically, New Brunswick, Hoboken, some of the other towns. It really needs a good look. But we couldn't do it. And tax-wise, we had already, Governor Whitman had reduced the income tax. We had reduced this, Chuck Italian and Bob Franks wanted to reduce the sales tax. I wasn't really for that, but I had to go along with that because they campaigned on that. You wouldn't remember this, but not when I was governor, but in 91, part of their campaign, the Republican campaign, was to reduce the sales tax. And I said to them, I was minority leader when we were with Tom Kane, when we raised the sales tax and the income tax. And a lot of our guys voted to raise the sales tax because the budget, we needed money in the budget. And we raised the income tax from 2.5 to 3.5. And Tom was his first year as governor, and he may not say that, but he was happy. It was more money. And I would always say to people, I voted to raise the sales tax, and I never got a letter criticizing me for that. 10 years later, we vote to reduce the sales tax, and I never got a letter thanking me for doing that. Because it's something that everybody pays.
Yeah.
So, but they had campaigned on that, and so we did that. So from a tax standpoint, we had already done a lot of stuff for business over those 10 years. Governor Whitman had reduced the income tax a little bit. We had reduced the sales tax, and so we had done a lot. So I wasn't focused on that part of it. And you mentioned a fourth thing.
Pensions.
The pensions, yeah, and I did make a change there. And Governor Christie, he hated me for that. He didn't hate me, but criticized it after he got into office. I did enhance the pensions for not only retired people, but for people in the system, the 55 thing. And he criticized that a lot after he became governor. But at the time, and it was 2001, it was 9/11. At the time, I would say to people, look, the people on Wall Street, they get bonuses. They get huge salary increases. The people working in this office, they don't. I want to give them, the end game should be good for these people. And so we made the end game better. I got criticized a lot for that, but I did. At the time, I thought it was the right thing to do. So that's pretty much on the pension end.
There are other things we should have asked you about, or you like
I don't know. I think we had a lot of. I had a new respect for people who work for government. After 9/11, I think they work hard. I asked people to do a lot of things that they didn't have to do, and it was a great experience. And the people who worked around me were terrific people, dedicated to making the state better. Jim Harkness, John Farmer, Jeff Michaels, Ciro, Connie Hughes. I was originally with me, and then I put her at the Board of Public Utilities. She was a lifetime person. Jim Hughes' wife.
Right.
So, Lillian Barone, Jim McGreevy wanted her to stay, but she said, if Don's leaving, I'm leaving. And so I had a lot of great people and a lot of great experiences at that time. We didn't have social media.
Right.
So that occurred right after I left. So I don't know, that's got to be really hard.
Yeah. You were there for the dawn of 101.5 and that kind of radio.
Well, 101.5, well, they hated me too. 101.5 was born because of Governor Florio, right? So that's what I was trying to say before. It's like Jim McGreevy, he tried to make change at Rutgers, and he couldn't. And that fella from Merck,
Fabulous?
Roy was spearheading that, because I left Jim a Rutgers position to appoint somebody to Rutgers board, and he appointed Roy Vangelis. And Roy was spearheading the change, and they didn't like the change. He could have waited to the second term for that. And there's things, you got to plan. You You have to do everything right away. I think you plan what's important. You do now as governor. If you're a governor, because you want to plan for 8 years because you hope that you're there for 8 years. And Tom Kean did it, and Christy Whitman. When Governor Whitman was first elected, they wanted to privatize everything.
Yeah.
They want vouchers. I mean, I couldn't get somebody to sponsor a voucher bill. Unions are very powerful in this state, and you have to really pick your spots. We did get a charter school bill passed, and kind of forced that. But we had to work with the union on that. You have to take baby steps, in my opinion, and that's what I had hoped to do. And a lot of people had hoped it would have been 9 years, but it was only one. So that's should I have stayed? You can debate this. Should I have stayed and put my family through that and maybe hopefully win the primary? Who knew? 9/11. You win the general, right. But that's hindsight. But I had a great legislative career. I was lucky, and I had a great year, and I was honored to do it, honored to be there, honored to work with all these wonderful people, and I think I finished strong.